We're going to move on to agenda item 4, which is review and discuss the Beecher Road School reopening plan. We're going to begin with a short PowerPoint presentation of the plan given by Superintendent Gilbert. This will provide a very condensed overview of the plan for those who may not have yet fully immersed themselves in the 46-page state document called Adapt, Advance, Achieve, Connecticut's Plan to Learn and Grow Together, or the 51-page document on the reopening of Beecher Road School. So I'm going to turn this over to Superintendent Gilbert.
Thank you very much, Chair Lynn, and thank you, everybody. I just want to say, first of all, thank you to everybody for the sharing that you've done. I want to thank you also, as I look back, for all your help this past spring in your partnership in unprecedented times.
Bob, for your sake, I'm just going to interrupt and to ask Carl to mute call in number 46, please. Sorry, Bob.
No problem. So let me just start quickly again. Thank you, everybody, for your sharing. Thank you for your help and your partnership this past spring. And thank you for all that you bring to the table and all the comments you have made tonight. We are certainly in unprecedented times. We are also certainly in a very emotional time. There's no doubt about that. We are trying to look at what we're asked to do by the state and bring balance to everything. Balance the priorities of safety, social, emotional well-being, academic growth, and we have many challenges and many obstacles. I also want to say, and I want to make sure that you know this, that we have continually checked in with our state Department of Education. As recently as today, I've spoken to 2 very high-level people in the State Department, and the reason for my call there is because I know the feelings that are out there from teachers, from parents. There's a wide variety of thoughts and feelings, but I wanted to let them know how people in Woodbridge feel right now, and the varying feelings and also the varying concerns and thoughts. And one of the comments that I wanted to I needed to again verify, we have been told, and it's our understanding, and it's still understanding, that this is the governor's dictate to us. We are creating a plan, you'll see in a moment, with 3 different components, but it's the governor who is mandating what will take place for Connecticut schools come the first day of school. And so while I wish that there perhaps was local decision-making, the superintendent making a decision or the board making a decision to take the option that we would prefer, at this point in time, that is not the way it has been presented at the state level, and having gone back twice today to check, that still remains the way it is. So I just want to make sure we understand that, but I do think that your voices are really, really important. I think you're very eloquent in the way you've been sharing, and I think it's really important for you to bring those messages to the places in Hartford where those messages need to be heard from specific people, because that's how our government works, and that's how we need to be making sure that your voices are heard. So I'm not going to, I think you have the picture there. I just want to make sure you know that. And I thank you again for your time. Lisa, are you able to put the presentation up? I'm going to really go through this very, very quickly, folks. I do want to say also that I greatly appreciate the committee, our committee, our reopening committee, as well as my administrative team and other members who have been helping out. We are working very, very hard at what we're doing here. And my goal here is to just present an overview. We were really planning initially to present all this on Monday, but the meeting got moved, at least this particular preliminary one, to tonight. So we were really under the gun. So I know that our documents only just got uploaded today. They'll be there. They're in e-meeting. This PowerPoint is in e-meeting as well. Lisa, are you able to bring that up? Thank you very much. Okay. So this is an overview of our plan. You can go to the next slide, Lisa. We have about 24 members on our reopening committee, a cross-section of stakeholders throughout our district and our town. Next slide. We want to know that we're basing our work on many resources, including the Adapt, Advance, Achieve, which is the state's guidance as to how we need to create a plan for the year coming up. You can go to the next one. These are the guiding principles that are guiding what we're doing, and everything from, again, as I mentioned earlier, returning full-time per state mandate, all students returning full-time per state mandate, safeguarding health, monitoring COVID-19 spread, emphasizing equity and access, two-way communication, and decisions regarding the opening and challenges in the different areas. Go to the next slide. You know that we surveyed you. I want to thank you for your survey responses in this most recent survey. I also want to thank you for the survey that you responded to on distance learning back a few months ago. Can someone figure out where that microphone is?
I'm trying, I'm on the hunt.
Okay. So,
Catherine,
Griffin,
Catherine,
thank you. Thank you for your survey responses, folks. Out of almost 500 responses, 63% of parents initially said a few weeks ago, I'm sending my child to school. About 31%, I'm not going to send my child, 5% saying I'm not going to send my child, and 31% were unsure. That was an initial survey. Next slide. So we have been asked by the State Department of Education to create 3 plans: the in-person learning, a hybrid, and the distance learning. Distance learning would be what we experienced this past spring. The in-person learning is the one that the state has mandated for us to move into and be prepared for at this point in time with the COVID-19 levels that we have and the good news, at least, that we are experiencing right now in Connecticut. Next slide. So Plan 1, in-person learning for all students, the one that we're aiming for and spending most of our time right now. Mostly a standard schedule, maximizing social distance, the masks, modifying our specials to make sure that those kind of specials that may be more needing more distancing, that we will modify where they're done or how they're done, cohorting students so they stay together as much as possible during the school day, and continuing our traditional grading practices. Plan 1 also has some other highlights, obviously. No, that's right. Yep, Lisa. We'll be changing lunch protocols, modifying some of our health service protocols, and transportation obviously is an area of focus. We'll talk about that in a few moments. And also maintaining the E-Day program before and after school. Our initial focus is on social emotional needs, bringing our students back together in that important bond and community. Along with Plan 1, we know that the guidance that the governor gave was that there also could be students who must remain home because of medical reasons. Also, that there may be parents who choose to keep their home regardless of the fact that we're trying to open up the school for everybody to be back in person. And so there are some obvious things here in terms of those who have medical challenges. If there is a medical reason, then we are going to need to provide a remote learning component for them. And also, if there's parent choice, the state has told us that as well. I will just try to simply say this, is that the state has still needing to provide more clarification to schools on how to do this and what the expectations are. And I'll say why that is because otherwise we have to run 2 different schools at the same time with the same staffing, running school in person at the same time as running school online. So this is a challenge for us, but it's something that we're waiting for more state guidance on. And there are also implications for technology, how we staff this, and obviously there are implications on how we are working with our unions in terms of the kinds of working conditions and the kind of things we're asking people to do. We'll go to the next slide. The next slide, in a nutshell, again, we've talked a lot about synchronous and asynchronous learning. I'm going to say that you can go back and look at some of these things since they just got loaded up today. You can take a look back at e-meeting and look at those if you're ever interested in those definitions. Let's go on to the next slide. The second plan is the hybrid model. This is where if there's a surge in the community spread of COVID-19, that we are going to have smaller groups of students in the school at one time. The model that right now we are looking at would be every single classroom in the school dividing in half, and really having a group A of students and a group B of students. And group A students, half those students would come to school 2 days a week, a Monday, Thursday, let's say, and the other half of the students come to school just 2 days, Tuesday, Friday. All students stay home on Wednesday, where the teacher is delivering distance learning to those students at home. Another version of this could certainly be that group A students come for an entire week, let's say, and then group B students come for the next week, and then alternate weeks. One of the other things that we're looking at with the hybrid model, there are still many details. This is probably what they call the superintendent's nightmare model, really, in many ways, because it's very, very challenging. One of the other considerations here is how do we coordinate with Amity so the same families are in school on the same day
I'm gonna
and
stop
home on the same day.
Kathleen Marlor, can you please mute?
Because we know that families sometimes are depending on their older siblings to supervise the younger brothers and sisters at home. And so we're looking at the coordination of Amity with Beecher on that kind of a model.
Liz Davies, please mute.
Can we go to the next slide, Lisa? Thank you. And Plan 3 is the distance learning model. This is the model that we're used to from the past spring. This model would be used if the rates of the spread even become more significant for long-term closures, or if there's a need for a short-term closure because there has been an identified case in the building, and our work with the Department of Public Health and QVHD indicates that we need to close for X number of days. And I've heard some of the comments in the audience tonight and the different thoughts. Yes, we've learned a lot about the distance learning model, and one of our priorities right now is really to take a look at how we'll prepare ourselves for this model to do a better job for everybody, a better job for the kids, number one. They're the most important people we have, and a better job continuity-wise for everybody, including parents, teachers, making sure that we're all on the same page. We've learned a lot. We've gotten a lot of good feedback from everybody around the horn, and so our goal is to really improve this model based upon our experience. Going on to the next slide. Special education services, we realize that we have a significant percentage of our population who receive services and are also compromised from a medical standpoint. And so we know we need to address not just educational, but also health and safety concerns for these students and families. And they will continue to be addressed on an individualized basis through our special education department. I'm going to mention again, we all know that masks have been a major item of discussion. Yes, there is a requirement for masks, a certain kind of mask. It could be either cloth or one that's not cloth, but a mask that like similar to the picture. We are planning frequent mask breaks. That's very, very important. And there will be certainly follow up with any students who are not required to wear a mask because of any medical or developmental concerns, and we will work to find solutions the best we can regarding that. Next slide is about social distancing. I think we've talked about this and we've heard a lot about this. The guidelines from the state are to maximize distancing to the greatest extent possible, reaching 6 feet whenever possible, but that is not the fullest requirement. It's just to the greatest extent possible. We're going to be doing things like reducing classroom furniture, having desks face the same direction, and obviously monitoring this and maximizing this particular area. The next slide talks about self-protective measures. Obviously, hand washing, hand sanitizer stations. There'll be soap and water in rooms that have sinks. There'll be hand sanitizer in all other locations. There'll be hand sanitizer at entrances and exits. We'll be using the right kinds of baskets so no one has to touch the top of a basket to get their paper into it in a garbage basket. And we're looking at how we can reduce the use of door handles and things like that by popping doors open wherever we're given permission by the fire marshal to do that. Next slide is about additional cleaning protocols. We are enhancing our cleaning protocols to, again, further the limit of the transmission. We will be bringing on additional custodial staff during the day to take care of the contact high touch points. Custodial staff will receive more training than they would normally have because of the obvious need to make sure we're sanitizing and disinfecting. Teachers, as I mentioned already, will have soap and water on hands in rooms where there's running water. And we're optimizing the conditions for our air circulation through our buildings. We are meeting with all of our important vendors and maintenance and in-house people, as well as the consultants who have helped us to improve the conditions in our building. And we're going to be doing that very shortly to make sure that our HVAC system is everything it should be for the benefit of our kids. Next slide talks about lunch protocols. We'll be looking at continuing to look at the options that we have, either additional lunch waves, eating in the classroom, outdoor dining. We are looking definitely at the purchase of tents or the rental of tents and looking at dining as one of those kinds of activities that could certainly be outside. Grab and go bag lunches. Don't worry, free and reduced lunch will continue to be provided as a mandate, and we will make sure that continues to happen. Cohorting, that whole idea of limiting to the greatest extent possible the interactions between students by keeping, it's really that middle bullet there on that page, maximizing the idea of keeping our homeroom classrooms together whenever possible during the school day. We recognize that students, we can't cohort them coming in by the bus or leaving by the bus, but during the school day, the idea of maximizing that is a strategy that the state has given guidance on and that will be taking very seriously on that. Going on to the next one, transportation. We thank you for your survey responses, parents, on the survey. We certainly know that parents have basically indicated what kind of transportation plans they have. 43 or 44% saying we're going to have transportation in both directions. This is pretty close, by the way, to what normally happens on a normal year in terms of the way this breaks out, as it's been told to me by our bus coordinator. And so certainly there'll be students who don't take the bus either direction because they never have, or they stay after school for E-Day or come early. So again, we thank you for this. There are going to be many routines for transportation that we are going to have to establish. We intend to the greatest extent possible and hopefully 100% have bus aids available for the first weeks of school to help students with the bus routines that are being expected, the mask requirements, distancing, and how we load and unload based upon the guidance we've been given. We will certainly be encouraging parents to continue to drive their children back and forth to school whenever possible. The next slide talks about the health protocols that we have that are school-based. Obviously, the number one rule that we're going to be continuing to strive and stress continuously is if you're feeling sick, stay home. There is going to be a heavy emphasis on parents being reminded and required to screen their own children before the kids leave for school. By the way, that's also for the staff. The staff is going to be asked and constantly reminded to screen yourself before you come to school. Heavy emphasis on reporting symptoms if you have anything during the day. If there's any individuals who test positive for COVID-19, we'll be immediately engaging the health department in contact tracing, and we'll quarantine, and we'll then also take the appropriate steps if their school closure is called for, and for how many days it's called for. We will obviously keep anonymous and confidential the names of anybody who tests positive. Going on to the next slide. We do plan on continuing our very popular and very important extended day program, both before and after school, that services our families and serves our kids and helps parents, especially the two working parents, families. We're going to use all the same health and safety protocols that we have during the day for our E-Day program before and after school. It will be a challenge to put all this together, but we'll need to make sure we identify the areas of the building that we can use for those students at those times, and also handle the dismissal for those students in the afternoon. Going on to the next slide. Calendar and transition back to school. We know that our students have never attended school like we are planning right now for, as the governor is mandating us to be prepared for in-person school. We've never had this before in some of these hoops that we're jumping through. Our initial goal will be to focus on the social emotional well-being of everyone. Relationships of students and teachers have always been paramount and a foundational success of Beecher Road School, and we will continue that. And we will continue that relationship and the importance of that regardless of what model we're using during the course of the year. We do anticipate talking to the board about calendar adjustments to support the transition into school, hopefully orientation for smaller groups of students. Also for the teacher preparation that's going to need to take place. It's not just about teaching and learning, but also about how to modify the classrooms themselves to make sure that we have as much distance between kids and getting rid of items in the room to allow for that distance. There has, I'll talk about flexibility and the change that goes on. It was constant in the spring, the guidance that we received. And even just in the last 24 hours, we've received guidance from the state that the state has approved the mandate, reducing the mandate of 180 days to 177 days for students and approving those 3 days for teachers to come in for professional development, for preparation of the classrooms, working on ahead of time on distance learning and how to make that as robust as it needs to be when it's going to be entailed and used. So you'll be hearing more about some calendar adjustments. We do look at those beginning days and hopefully beginning day, week and a half perhaps as minimum days in order to make sure that we can successfully make this transition into the building. The next slide talks just really about a summary of everything. I appreciate your patience during this very, very quick presentation. There are still many questions to be answered by the state for us. We, even though we have a very robust and a very good draft that you can certainly find in e-meeting. Again, this is not the plan, folks. This is a summary. The plan is also uploaded in the e-meeting link. We have further work in protocols. That is a very much a large a big picture kind of a plan with some protocols. More work has to happen. We will have to enter into memorandums of understanding with our different unions because of the differences of what's taking place this year versus a normal year. I talked about the calendar adjustments. We've surveyed parents already. We may look at additional surveys. There are significant budget and staffing implications for this model. It's not just, obviously, it's not just some students who may not be coming to school because of medical reasons or similar, but that's also a reality for staffing. So we have that. We have technology implications to make our technology more robust in order to be providing what we need to provide, flexibility and continued communication. I think that's the last slide, if I'm not right. And I thank you for your patience on that. And I will open it up, turn it back to Lynn for the board's discussion, comments, questions, and what have you.
Bob, thank you for that overview. I thank you to the administrative staff for working on preparing that for this evening. We're going to start with board discussion now. So I'm going to just call on each of you and you can comment and then we'll go back around again. David Ross, do you want to start?
I'm not sure I was quite ready to start mine, but I guess I can start.
Great.
Thank you everybody for all the thoughtful comments. I really appreciate it. This is a very difficult situation. And I appreciate hearing everybody's comments, especially from the teachers. Bob, I guess I have a question from the beginning, which is the first slide you put up said that the state is mandating, I think the word that I saw was allowing all students to return full time. And I think this is the crux of my question, which is we have this plan that says in-school, hybrid, distance. And I'm really curious to understand, it doesn't sound like families are mandated to do that if they don't want to, or if they have reasons why they wouldn't. And I'm really curious to understand what proportion of families feel which way about whether they want to be in school, whether they would want a hybrid model, or whether they would want a distance model. So it seems conceivable to me that there are some families, particularly younger kids or with working parents or with whatever circumstances, for whom having a school experience is going to be especially important. And it might be something like what Sherry was talking about, where we have more outdoor time, more space, different types of activities that are focused on social emotional learning. There are some kids who may have done very well with distance learning and want some sort of hybrid, something in between. But it seems to me, as everybody's saying, there's no question there's going to be some component of distance learning over the year. So I think we need to start thinking really constructively, how are we going to differentiate? Who's going to be getting what type of instruction? And I'm really curious to hear from the teachers if there are teachers who prefer different approaches. Are there teachers who would rather be teaching outside in some different limited setting? Are there teachers who love teaching online and would rather do that? Might we start to think about ways to more creatively divide up the space? So I think that's my first set of questions that I'm really curious to learn more about.
Thanks, David. I think just a brief answer to that to start with would be that the state is mandating, at least at this point, that we have in-person instruction, and that's what we offer. We offer full days, 5 days a week, and that there also be a parallel track for either those who can't be here medically or those who choose not to be in the school. And so there would be both in-person instruction going on all day, all week, and then a distance learning track, which needs to have some further definition by the state, because the state realizes that school districts are very much challenged to try to do both of those things well. We would also be taking a look at our staffing, and we would be looking at the fact that we may have staff who can't be in the building for a legitimate reason. And I don't mean that, and I don't mean to use the word legitimate in any positive or negative or light. I'm just saying, there's a documented reason. And so we need to know how our staffing is going to work. We need to see how those people might be the solution to how we take care of the students who are at home learning because they have chosen or they're medically not able to come to school. So let me start there. I'm not sure that I'm thinking there's more questions to, I think there's more to your question than that, but let me start there. Did that help or not? No.
It starts to get there, but it seems to me this is where the work needs to be right now, is starting to really flesh out what this model is going to look like.
That's exactly right. That's the work this plan is not the end of the work. This plan is almost the beginning of the work, because we had to define certain things, and there's a lot more to be done here by the administrative team and the reopening committee and interfacing with other people. So some of our work as we move forward, starting tomorrow morning, we have a reopening committee meeting tomorrow to really reflect on this meeting tonight, but also to take a look at how do we now engage the areas that we need to, now to step it up and figure out how to do that. There are so many parts to that. There are so many parts to that.
David, do you have anything at the moment?
We have a large board. I defer to the team. I'll have more questions later when we get back around.
Okay, thanks. Joyce Shavers, do you have a comment or question to make?
Yes. First of all, I just want to thank Bob and his administrative team and the committee for their countless hours of work. I've heard many, many stories of the amount of dedication, effort, and time that they have given. And the issues are incredibly complex and the stakes are very, very high. So I just want to say thank you for really trying to pull this all together. And these are very challenging times. I wanted to ask, I understand that there is a state mandate that we have to go back full time, but what happens if we don't? What are the consequences? So that would be my first question. The second question would be, would it be possible, we have a board meeting on Monday, and this is just, I understand, the beginning of the dialogue, right, and the planning. But for me, I would very much appreciate hearing from experts. We have experts like Dr. Sherry Storygard, who so eloquently spoke and provided lots of wonderful problem-solving solutions, possible solutions. There is also Dr. Shannon Martinello, who is our Beecher Road School medical advisor. She probably has some title, but basically that is the function that she plays. So it would be interesting to hear from her. And there was a reference many times by all, through the correspondence that we have seen to Dr. Allison Galvani as well, the director of infectious disease at Yale. There may be other experts as well that we should hear from, and I would welcome hearing from other board members as to whether they would add to that list. But it would help inform, I think, our decision making were we to hear from these people. I would also be interested in hearing from the MAG teachers because from the survey results, the written comments showed that there were quite a few shout outs in the survey feedback, as well as tonight about the synchronous learning model that they had rolled out, and people, quite frankly, raved about it. And I would be interested to see what they did and whether there's some learning for the rest of us on maybe some things that we could do in other situations. So those would be my questions for now.
Joyce, would I be able to just make just a quick, I would like to just say that you mentioned the question about what happens if we don't do what they tell us to do. So I think that's a question for someone higher up at the state. That's a very complicated one, I'm sure. I also know, though, that it's those of you who are following the news that, and I'm just making an observation. Yesterday, I noticed that on August 1st, there's going to be another opportunity for the state to either reaffirm, based upon the COVID-19 levels in the state, that we continue to strive to bring everybody back as has been dictated already, or if there's any other information that it may be interesting that the governor will be commenting on. So there is a point in time, but what I would say is I pushed that question for two different people higher up in the department today, and it's an unwavering. You don't have a choice. This is the governor's mandate, and so I think the board would be needing to talk to their legal counsel about that, because I think that's the kind of answer that I felt that I was receiving.
Yes, thank you, Bob, for giving more background on that. But I think it's worthwhile, given all the feedback that we've heard, whether it is full-time distant learning or whether it's a different hybrid model than envisioned from the state plan. Either way, I think that for our community, it seems like the stakeholders are not comfortable with the models that have been laid out by the state for various reasons. And so I think we should find out what will happen. And if that's, I don't know if it's a Floyd question or a question for someone else, but maybe if you could help us navigate and figure out exactly what the consequences are for deviating, I think that would be helpful.
Mhm.
Just to see what our options really are.
Okay, thank you, Joyce. Mike Strambler, do you have any comments to make or questions to ask?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Mike, we can.
So, yeah, I also want to thank everyone for their comments tonight, both the teachers and the family members. I want to thank Bob and the reopening committee for all the time they've put in to developing this plan. I have some of the same questions that David and Joyce asked about the consequences. What are the consequences for us not following this mandate? It just seems to me that um, a governor can't mandate any parents to send their kids to school. And I think where that leaves us is that there are going to be many, and we've heard this tonight, there are going to be many parents who decide not to send their kids to school, regardless of what the governor mandates or regardless of what we do as a school district. And so, from my perspective, it seems like it's kind of we're going to be in at least a hybrid model anyway. So we may need to, as a school district, stay open, as a school, stay open, so that allows kids who and families who want to send their kids to school to have that as an option. That maybe is something that can be mandated, but I think the reality is most likely going to be that parents aren't going to do that. And we still have a responsibility to educate those kids who decide not to send, or those kids who are not being sent to school for in-person instruction, which kind of, leads me to, be thinking more about this um, distance learning um, and the need for a more robust system than we've had over this past year. And I think that we're given that that is definitely going to be something that we're going to need to rely upon for this coming year. I would like to hear us a little bit more about what our plans are for building a more robust system than we previously had. I also so that's one question. I think the earlier question about what can be mandated and what the consequences are. I think probably we've already responded to that. I think the other question is so we've heard from the teachers that hardly any of them um, are interested or well, not. Let me take that back. They're interested, but they're concerned. They're very concerned. They're very reluctant, understandably, to return to the school. And I completely understand that. I'm curious to know if there are any teachers who are willing to return to the school for in-person instruction. And I think that information could be valuable and useful for us if we're considering some kind of hybrid model where maybe the majority of kids end up being at home doing distance learning, but some kids will just need to return to school for a host of reasons that we've heard tonight. So if that's the case, and we're not requiring all teachers to return to school, um, do we have a sense of how many teachers would be willing to return to school to support those kids who would be there for in-person instruction?
Mike, if I could just, I'll respond to say that we have reached out to all of the teachers and non-certified staff as well in the recent week. And while I'm not going to give numbers over the air here, we are working towards identifying exactly what you're talking about. Where are there concerns about returning that we need to support and work with our staff members, who's able to come back, and all of that. So we've been working on that since middle of last week, and it's obviously, as you know, it's a critical part of what makes the equation work here for the school. So yes, the answer is we're working with that right now to identify that, because that is, yeah, how we make this jigsaw puzzle work depends on exactly that. Who's here and who's not here. And how the people who are not here can perhaps help the students who are not here as well.
And so related to the other question about building on our distance learning. I was wondering what your thoughts are on the ways in which we could make that a more robust and successful system.
Yeah, I would say so.
Had last year.
I think just on a very on a big picture, we held forums with and back before the end of the school year. We indicated to parents, if you'd like to be part of a distance learning forum, please let us know. Teachers and teacher assistants as well. We held 3 different forums with those 3 different groups, and what we came away with, really, I'll use the word consistency and expectations for all the groups. The idea that we needed to have consistency and well communicated expectations and clear expectations, reasonable but also rigorous expectations for our students, and also the kind of expectations and consistency where if I had a child in the 2nd grade and I also had a child in the 5th grade, that I would feel like there was a very similar experience that they were receiving during that time. One of the things that I know our teachers want to do is to prepare distance learning this summer to be able to make sure that we're on that same page before we get the year started. So that would be part of our professional development. But we also wanted to make sure, so besides the consistency, we also wanted to look at how do we increase the opportunities for students to have interactions with their teachers, but also interactions with each other. And so, again, bring around expectations around that area to make sure that the social and emotional well-being of students and the relationship aspects are being delivered. So those are the areas that we know. Those are some of the main buckets, I guess you could say, that we would be working at for that. And then I think also the last one I would say is that there was definitely a identification of can we make the resources for the parent, can we make this user-friendly where there's one-stop shopping in one place to get everything I need, as opposed to fragmented emails that might be coming out. There's a little bit here, there's a little bit there. To make sure that the template that we have is a one place where one can go without having to have multiple directions at multiple times coming out from the teacher. So those are some of the things I think that we're working at that would be our goals.
Anything else?
Not right now. Thank you. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Mike. Jeff Townsend, comments or questions?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate all the comments previous board members have made. And I think I have a lot of agreement with those questions as ones that we should be addressing carefully as we look at this draft plan and revise it. I have a question that's a little bit about that is very much along those lines, but just maybe focusing on a little bit more on the actual content of the plan as written, at least how it's introduced. As we've heard, there's many parents who are concerned about entry of students into the school, and as we've talked about, there's definitely going to be some component of parents who don't have children going to the school for full entry. What that means is that the full allowed plan that we've talked about, which is in concept the safest plan that this is the plan that you do when there's a lot of safety for students to go in, will in fact be not a hybrid plan, because that word is reserved for use in this context for this sort of alternating week plan, which I think in all reality will never happen, because there will either be sort of a situation of keeping school because there is ongoing transmission, or in fact, on the other hand, there'll be a situation where people feel that it is safe and students may be going to school and others will want to keep their kids away from school in the context of a situation where they're afraid that the epidemic may spread to community transmission in Woodbridge and within our school. So just to try to be really clear, what I want to ask is, in the context of looking at that full entry plan, there's a whole carve out, which you mentioned briefly, about parents who choose not to send their kids to school. So even in the full plan, there is a way to design a system which is consistent with many of the comments that people have addressed here. And so, with respect to that, I have read the plan, and at the very beginning of the plan seems to make normative statements about bringing students to the school as the objective, when in fact I think the objective here is to provide the best education to the students that we can in the context of what is happening right now. So what I would like to just ask you is, what is the perspective that has been brought to this reopening plan in terms of what that full allowance of all students to come to the school is, in terms of trying to bring students into the school, or in terms of trying to provide the best education to parents and to the children, in the context of the fact that some parents are going to be exercising the choice not to send their kids to the school.
Here, here.
Well, so Jeff, I think, I'll start off by saying that and I may have some of my administrative team members, add in here if they'd like to, but I think our goal, again, the goal that we feel like we were provided was to bring back and to make the full day, full week experience happen, and have it happen with the highest quality as possible. And at the same time, it's sort of like saying, okay, we want you to do everything for everyone, and it's sort of carrying on two schools. I think we've been asked to try, and we're still waiting for the state to provide more guidance on that parallel track that I talked about. That parallel track that says, I would prefer to keep my child home, but I still want a quality experience for my child. That's going to be a very, very difficult thing to deliver. And perhaps delivering what we do in the school for the 60 or 70%, whatever the percentage was here, that quality is going to be a different quality than if we were in a normal situation. So I think, both situations are going to get, look, they're both going to be compromised. I mean, there's no doubt about it. There's going to be a lot of time spent on just routines and transitions that you never would have spent before, instead of, actual problem solving in groups of, kids solving problems at desks and all that. I mean, kids are going to be facing the same way in a room. They're not going to have groupings of desks to do problem solving as a foursome, let's say, or six kids together. They're going to be facing, the teacher optimally 6 feet apart. Can they still interact with each other? Yes, but it's going to be different. So there's going to be a different quality to both of those experiences, as I see it.
Great question.
I don't want to take too much time, but I just want to emphasize that I think we should think carefully about what our objective is with this report, in the sense that perhaps the audience is the state. But I think certainly for the audience at this meeting right now, what is important about this report is what it says about what we are going to be doing in the fall. And so from that perspective, I think we would do well to try to address that report to the parents and to the teachers who are all expressing these concerns about whether they, as teachers or the students, may actually be there or not in the context of even the full reopening. So can we address those concerns clearly in this report to the extent that we can in the very limited time we have before we have to send this to the state? That's my request.
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Do you have anything else?
That's all I'll say right now, because I think we need to let other people speak.
Good. We'll give Dan
Definitely.
Countess a chance to speak.
Thank you, Lynn. So I have a couple comments to make. And first off, I want to thank Bob for, my experience on the Board of Ed has always been that you learn so much so fast in participating in this. So, and people make such insightful comments. So thank you, Bob, for some of the comments you made. I think it sparked some ideas in my mind. And I want to thank all the parents and everybody else for reaching out because I learned so much about the perspective of other people by hearing other people speak. So to kind of piggyback on what Jeff was saying and what everybody else was saying is, I do think we have the flexibility in the mandate to actually meet everybody's goals. And I think that we're all almost had the cart before the horse in a lot of ways. You obviously have a huge population of people who don't want to bring their kids back to school. You might have a parity population of teachers who don't want to go back to school. And so if you match those two people up, you could have a solution already. But the problem you're paralyzed by is that you don't have the data. So I almost think you need to do a formal enrollment of the entire school parents and say, if your children go back to school on this day, will you be opting in or will you be opting out? Because with that information in hand, then you can then go to your teachers and say, hey, we need 10 teachers. That's all we need. 90% of our kids opted out. You make this assumption that 60% of people want to come back. I know you got one, I'm sending my kid back, no matter what, but she might be there by herself, and she'll have the whole school to run around by herself. So that's one comment that I'd like to make.
Private education, Dan.
Say again?
Private education.
Private education. She can slide around on a potato sack down the hall. The one comment that was made about having medical experts come in to speak, and I think it's great to have medical experts come in to speak. However, medical experts are really good at defining what the problem is, and we all kind of know what the problem is. The people that you need to come speak are people who can solve the problems. So you need to get your engineering consultants in there. You need to get people who actually address, how you solve it. And we know what the problem is. It's distance. You get some people in there, get cleanliness people. There's lots of experts that define. So I think you need both experts to come in. The people who define the problem for you, the epidemiologists, the doctors, and then you need the people who can actually provide the solution because they're different groups of people. So the one question I had, I'll wait for my question at the very end. One other thing I want to make clear is as I listen to everyone speak, we have to acknowledge the fact that money is finite, right? We have a budget. We have one of the highest mill rates in this area. And although safety is key, and I don't want to make anybody do anything they don't want to do, money is finite. And if we spend it unwisely, we're going to run out of it. The biggest thing I walked away from what Bob said, and that I didn't think about before, is that we need to go to the governors, the senators, and the legislators and say to them, get out of our town. Stop telling us what to do. So there's 160 people on this call right now. Over 160 emails should go out to each of those groups of people tonight saying, we're the town of Woodbridge. We're going to do what we want to do. Stop telling us what to do and pull your mandates back. And if we do that, then we have a better voice. And that's the way our government should work. And then I guess the final thing I wanted to say was about actual logistics of it. Bob, this is a question for you now. Have we discussed our plan with Orange and with Bethany and Amity? Have we worked with them in concert and how we're going to do this? Does community spread, I think there was one term that I noticed, it was like community spread surge or something like that. The definition of that term, is that the same for Amity, Bethany, Orange? And what are the objectives? And I know you don't have it today. I'm not expecting you to have it today, but in the published report, we should have objective values for what that is. Community spread surge is this number, daily deaths per, whatever, or some other metric, but whatever it is, it needs to be objective and not subjective, because what I got from this thing is that this is a very scary situation and everybody deals with that fear differently. Some people fight, some people flight, and we all have different mechanisms for dealing with it. And so we need objective metrics to guide our decisions. We can't use emotions to do that. So my question is the synchronicity between the districts.
Yeah, and in terms of the community spread numbers, that is something that is set by QVHD, DPH, overall CDC, from a federal level. So that is where those numbers are going to be um, um, guiding us. And we're not making those numbers up in our nursing room by ourselves here at Beecher Road School. This is something that is from a local and state level and probably federal as well, how that's going to be guiding us in terms of, do we need to move to a hybrid model because there is an increased transmission and we need to further reduce and have more mitigating strategies, mitigating meaning less kids in the building, or do we need to even go further than that and have distance learning? The question about working with our sister districts, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, we've had numerous conversations. Whenever there's some information that comes out, we're constantly talking together. Bethany, I can speak more about Bethany than I can about Orange, but Bethany and Woodbridge have typically walked more hand in hand with lots of things that we've done. When we had to close school down, we worked very, very closely together. Our special ed departments worked closely together. As superintendents, we did kind of replicated what we were doing along the way. Their models are looking very similar right now as ours are. They may have different kinds of responses in their community than we do. Perhaps I don't even know that, but so we're working very closely. As you can see with Amity, we're looking at the hybrid model. We want to be able to partner if we have that model to make sure that we're trying to be user-friendly to families and have families have some continuity for their kids in terms of what days they're home and what days they're not home. So we're absolutely sharing a lot of information. The secondary level, things are a little bit different at the secondary level because the schedules for kids are different at the secondary level. And also kids at the secondary level, there's obviously more independence for kids and so they can do things a little differently, 7th through 12th grade versus 5-year-olds through 12-year-olds at our level.
All right, so I'm going to pin you down a little bit more because, you said that the CDC, state, federal are setting the community spread numbers, right? And I can hear that, but where can we find those numbers? What's going to be, if I say I want to monitor rainfall, I'm going to go to the Hartford Airport, and I know where to look to find those numbers. Because if we're not going to develop our own numbers, and there's nothing to say that we can't develop our own numbers of what we define a community spread in Woodbridge, it probably has to be less than what those other organizations, but we could say, hey, we want to retract based on this. We have the ability to be more conservative than other places if we choose to. So I'm just going to pin you down and say, I need to find out from you where I get those objective numbers and what objective numbers you're going to be using so that I can then look at those, and make myself make intelligent decisions. And then I remember one last thing I wanted to say, and then I'll turn my time over, is again and again, I heard people talk about outside, being outside, and I also heard people mention the HVAC system. So I sit on the facilities committee, and I'd like to share some information about our specific HVAC system and one of the boons that we actually do have. We had a situation last year where we were forced to address the quality of our air conditioning system. And we've invested a lot of money in controls and monitoring, and we know in real time how much fresh air we're bringing into our school. We have the ability, we have equipment in our school that allows us to bring in more fresh air than most other schools. I work with other schools in the state, and they have zero ability to bring fresh air into their classrooms. Zero. They were told, like, their reopening plan is open a window, and it doesn't matter how cold it is outside. So I've seen opening plans in schools that are that rudimentary because that's what their district can afford. Our district can actually force air into our school and bring the outside in. So we have a unique situation that we have invested in our infrastructure already. And I think that we can set up omnidirectional flow, that the air comes in from the outside, goes through the classroom, and leaves via the exhaust system and never is recirculated. We have that ability in some of our classrooms. So I think we should make sure we leverage all our professionals, all our consultants to figure out how best we can bring the outside in, because we are blessed that we have that ability. That's it.
Thank you, Dan. Megan Genovese, do you have any comments or questions tonight?
Try to unmute myself. Can you hear me, Lynn?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So yeah, so much. I guess again, yeah, thank everyone for their thoughts and comments. This is such a big issue and it goes so deep on so many levels. It has been great to hear from teachers and parents and we've been wanting some feedback, so that's been really good to have some voices behind that. And our administration, thank you all, because I know this has been such a lift. I mean, reading a 50-page document in the last 48 hours was a lift, so I can't even imagine trying to pull it together, never mind that this is just scratching the surface. I think I agree so much with previous board members. I don't want to, it's late and I don't want to be too redundant, but I think a lot of what folks have said is really important. One thing, trying to highlight a few things really quick. One thing I would really like to think about focusing on is the remote learning parallel track. I know, Bob, you mentioned that you'll be looking into it more and learning more about it, but that does feel like maybe the out to not breaking the rules, but being able to nurture kids from home, that when parents are not comfortable to send them, even if they don't have a medical reason to not come in, but they have an innate gut, purpose to not want to send them in. And I think it's tricky because we don't know, like Dan said, what the numbers are for teachers. So obviously we need to know more about that if there are teachers willing to come in. And maybe if it's a half and half thing, that automatically helps things because there's less people in the building. I don't know. But Bob, I would like to learn more about the remote learning and thinking about how that can transition into the distance learning. I know Connecticut has put a hub up and I would be interested in learning more about that. Have you guys looked into the hub yet? I don't know that that's an option that our teachers are going to want to use, but if the teachers aren't using it, is that an option for parents to use? I saw that it said that when students are not coming back in the Bayer document, when they're not coming back right away, that they can choose to use the hub. So I don't know if that's even, if admin has had a chance to look at that and vet that at all to see if that seems like a viable option. But I do think it's important for families to know that is an option.
Want me to answer?
Go ahead,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, sure. So first of all, the remote, the learning hub that the State Department has created and unveiled, I believe in time, as they describe it, it's going to be potentially a great resource. When it first came out, which is just really a few weeks ago, and recently, as recently as maybe a week and a half ago, I went in there. It would not be, at least the day I looked at it, the most recent time, and there's been no more updates that I'm aware of. Although we have so many things going on, I haven't checked it in a few days. It wasn't the user friendly for a parent kind of a place to stop in, that a parent could say, oh, here's the 5th grade curriculum. Here's things for September, the first week and the second week and the third and da 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 da. It's not. I would hope that it might be at some point because it might be the kind of resource that would really help us, especially if we were in a pinch. But so we're going to monitor that and keep looking at that to see how that unfolds. I do think that we are looking. I mean, I think one of the areas that we need to, as I mentioned earlier, make good on and really spend our time in is creating a more robust distance learning plan, that third option, that third model, because I think all of us believe, whether it's the first month of school or whether it's going to be sometime in November or January or February, we're going to be going to that at some point. And if we don't have to, because things become so wonderful here, then all the better. But it is an area that we need to work on and we need to spend some time. These are some of the areas as we move past tonight. The administration, look, we have it helped us to frame what the big pictures are. Within each of these three big pictures, we need to now get into the creative part or the pragmatics of how we do this, whether it's the staff members who are available or whether it's or whether it's the online components that we might use. That's where we are right now. That's what administration will be doing and hopefully bringing in applicable staff members to help us with that as we move forward.
Thanks, Bob. And I think being mindful that, I guess the parallel track is an interesting thing to think of because it's kind of part of what I was envisioning hybrid might have meant at one point, but it's differentiating how you've defined hybrid with a different way. So that's good that that's differentiated. But also being mindful that students may be in and out. Students might be getting sick or not. Students might just be getting cold,
Yes,
but
that is
not.
true.
We're going to be very hypersensitive even if school is open. So there's going to be a lot of in and out, probably teachers as well as students. It just seems so important to and maybe I'm just harping on something that's already clear. That there's going to be some level of distance learning. It seems like at all points in time, and how important that is to help nurture that process and to really help our teachers get prepared for that.
Mhm.
And thinking about how I don't know how that will play out.
I think students in and out is a very good observation. I mean, that's absolutely true. There's going to be students who are, yeah, right, exactly. And so what we're doing for them at home during that time for the remote learning, in order to make sure that they are ready to come back in 2 weeks if they've been quarantined for 2 weeks or whatever that might be. That is, I guess, the way we're looking at. And back to a comment that Jeff made earlier. It's like, what's our objective, and are we going to have quality in both places, just one place or the other? How do we keep the quality so it can go like this when kids have to leave but then come back? So there's that aspect that we have to kind of look at too in this, and that's also the coordination between the staff members who may be here in the building and the staff members who are not in the building, and how that communication is going in order to have that part go as well.
Something that others have mentioned too is I had heard wonderful things. I've experienced MAG personally. Well, my son has, so vicariously through him. But to check in with all teachers. I think all teachers, obviously have input and probably have some amazing ideas that haven't even come to light in this call because we can only do so much in one call. But finding out, worries and fears is important to hear because they need to be addressed. But thinking about what did go right last spring and checking in with teachers and asking for input on what they felt went well, what parents felt went well, and how we can try to really incorporate that into this more robust distance learning model. Dan, I think that was interesting what you said about the HVAC system, because I do think there really is a lot of evidence how being outside makes a big difference compared to being inside, or I guess the point is having air moving is a really important thing, because the non-moving air and the microdroplets and all that can be very problematic over long periods of time. So that is a very interesting comment that you made, Dan, and I would be interested in learning more about that. But I love Dr. Storygard's suggestions, and I understand that this is so hard, and there's not going to be one solution that's going to fit for every student, and we know that. But we need to try to see what we can do for everyone in different layers. So I would really love it if admin would consider the possibility of outside learning and what that means and what that could look like. And again, it might not be for everybody. It might be groups. But yeah, getting feedback from teachers and seeing what their thoughts are and what they would like to do would be helpful with that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Jeff Hughes?
Sorry, Lynn, one more quick thing.
Hold on, Jeff Hughes.
Sorry, Jeff. One quick thing. I just wanted to mention it because, anyway, and I appreciate the whole mask thing is so controversial, and the idea of having breaks at the very least is great, and hopefully outside time can help with that. But another thing I just wanted to mention was it's not just mask breaks, but movement breaks. Our kids are not going to be walking around the school like they used to. They won't be having probably gym the same way they used to. And it's really important to make sure that our kids, who are probably going to be a little anxious and antsy as it is, have more movement time. And that I think also can be covered in the outside time. So that's it.
Thanks for that comment as well, Megan. I had that on my list also. Jeff Hughes.
Yes, I'd like to thank Bob and the committee for the work they're doing. I think your guys' work has just begun, so I appreciate all you're doing. I also like to thank the parents and everyone here who had the chance to speak or type in during chat. I think an open dialogue during this time period is extremely important, and I think as a community, it shows us really who we are. We're able to see each other's differences and come together at the end. I also like maybe to point this to Bob, maybe explore the option of maximizing time spent outdoors. I think that's a great idea that gains some traction on the chat and the public opinion. I know it probably adds an extra layer of challenges for our incredible teaching staff, but I'd like to look into how we can help support that. And I also agree too, we need a strong, robust, distant learning system in place. I think at one point we're prepared to be fully engaged with it. And I think strengthening that distance learning should be one of our top priorities. And any way we can help support that, I think we're in on that.
Thanks.
Okay, so just, I also had on my list, Bob, the movement breaks as well as the mask breaks are going to be important because we're not going to have movement through the halls and even going to specials and the specialists will be coming into the classroom. So I think that is an important component. I appreciate Megan bringing that up. And also on my list, I had, and I think Megan alluded to this as well, differentiating all of our plans to meet the needs of the different age levels, because distance learning, remote learning, hybrid model, having kindergartners do that is very different than having sixth graders or high school kids. So I think we need to be cognizant of differentiation in all of the models that we're presenting. And Dan touched on, which is on my list as well, coordination with the BOA districts. And I think that we really need to have open communication with the Amity system, because many of our children have siblings that are in the Amity system as well. And so I think for parents planning, whatever we can do, and I know that Bob, you've done some talking, being on the reopening committee, I know that there's been some talking with Amity about that, but I wanted to say that publicly so that people are aware that there's conversation going on. So thanks for all of that. I too want to thank all the parents who have commented. It is very helpful for, I think, everyone who's involved in the reopening plan, the administrators and everyone else who's on that committee, and for the Board of Education to hear what people are feeling and thinking and what their concerns and anxieties might be. And so I appreciate everyone's honesty tonight. So that was very helpful. I'm going to go back, and if a board member has a follow-up question, another question, I'm going to just go back through the list, and you can pass or you can jump in. So David, you were first, so you're going to be first again.
I agree with everything everybody's saying. I think we've identified a very large number of topics that we need to explore further. I don't think there's any need to belabor it now. We have time until Monday to be thinking more, and then we're going to have time to discuss on Monday. So I'll leave it be for now.
Thank you for saying that, because also at the bottom of my list of notes, it says, I want everyone to remember that there's a reopening committee meeting tomorrow that's going to kind of talk about this and debrief on what was spoken about tonight. And there is our regular Board of Ed meeting on Monday, July 20. Joyce, you're next if you have a follow-up.
Yeah, in anticipation of our Monday night meeting, in addition to making arrangements for having experts come in and speak to us, I would also like to see the full presentation of the teacher survey that was referenced. I think that would be helpful. In particular, I would like to know exactly how many teachers ultimately would be willing to come back, because there is a segment of our population, either because they don't learn well through distance learning, they might have special needs, or they may be young children, or that school may be a safe haven for them, or because they have parents that need to go to work for whatever reason. There will be families that need school, and so do we have enough teachers to satisfy those needs? So I think we need to get a better grip on that. But it does seem like there needs to be a very strong focus on distance learning, given the number of families that potentially would be opting into distance learning. I know that there is a state mandate, but could we envision a scenario where that carve out for families is flexibly interpreted? And I would urge us to try to solidify where we're headed, because the wait and the delay is causing, I think, a lot of anxiety, and it's preventing people from really being able to plan. So I think, yes, everyone is saying we need to improve distance learning, and whether distance learning is improved will really drive people's decision as to whether they will opt for that, among other, considerations. So this whole scenario of, well, can we think about the carve out more flexibly to allow people to do what they feel is comfortable? I would say, look, I know that we're deviating, we're kind of pushing the envelope here, but I'd be interested in hearing how other people are thinking about it and whether it would make sense to explore that option. Because our community is different than other communities. So Lynn, I don't know how we would action, setting up Monday's meeting with making sure that we have experts that can come talk to us, and making sure that we get to see the full presentation and maybe be able to ask some questions to the teachers.
So I'll ask, is it the pleasure of the board to have experts invited to our Monday regular Board of Ed meeting? Joyce, you would be in favor of that?
I'm in
David
favor of
Ross?
that.
David Ross? Mike, are you in favor of that?
Yes.
Jeff Townsend?
Depending on who they are.
Oh,
Yes is the answer, Lynn. Sorry, I had my thumb up.
sorry, I can't see. I couldn't see you, Jeff. I'm sorry.
All the people here.
Megan, are you in favor of that?
Yes, I would like to hear.
Joyce, there was somebody you had in mind, right? There was a particular person that you wanted to invite, Joyce?
Sorry, let me unmute myself. So some people that I thought of, and other people may please add to the list, but Dr. Shannon Martinello, who is our medical advisor, whatever title she has, Dr. Sherry Storygard, I think people really loved hearing the ideas that she had, and I would appreciate her thoughts as we plan forward. And Dr. Allison Galvani. I'm also interested in any experts that Dan would put forth as well. I think the more experts that people feel help inform our decision-making would be great.
Okay, let me finish. Dan Cowan, comments about experts?
Yeah, so comments about experts. I think that we can choose one medical expert and maybe one other. I don't think we need to hear from three medical experts because they're all going to kind of have the same bent on it. I would default maybe to the first two, or maybe two medical experts. You know, we have finite time, just like we have finite money. Maybe the first two you recommended, they're baked into the school already. They're part of the committees. And then I think Van Zelm, Bob, like maybe we get somebody from Van Zelm to come speak on it. I don't know
Well,
if there's-
Shannon and, sorry, Dr. Martinello and Dr. Storygard are in the same practice. So, you know, I don't,
So maybe just one of them and then one, you know,
Shannon and Allison would be great. They're different.
Okay.
There's a difference between a pediatrician and an epidemiologist. They'll have different things to say.
yes.
Okay. Jeff Hughes?
Yep.
Okay, so Bob, maybe we can make some arrangements with those people. I know that Shannon Martinello is on the meeting tonight, but since we're not in public comment, I'm hoping that Shannon might be available on Monday night. Shannon,
Sure.
if you could chat, you're not.
I
She
am
said-
available. I sent it in on the chat.
Oh, sorry, I missed that one. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you, Lee.
So-
Can we also action seeing the full results of the teacher survey, just so that we can really, you know, I took down some notes, but I think a visual presentation would be helpful because I might not have captured everything accurately.
I'm not sure I understand. When you say teacher survey, are we referring, what are we referring to?
The WEA survey that was,
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Okay.
I wonder if it would be appropriate to send that to us via email. Is that?
Can we post that in advance, please?
I think we would have to ask the WEA if they would be willing to share that with us ahead of time. That's their survey, not the administration's. Just throw that out. And they may very well do, but we'll have to check on that, right, Bob? Is that correct?
Yeah, we would need to do that. Yes. Yep. Yep.
so the desire I kind of heard from the board right there would be that you, Lynn, maybe would reach out to the WEA and ask them directly and see if they'll transmit it.
I can certainly do that.
Thank you.
Lynn, could I just mention just a couple of things here? So I'm taking away that we want to have some of the experts visit and be part of the meeting on Monday. I'm hearing also that we would like to,
Someone needs to mute.
the board wants to know some more detail about the survey. I think I also heard earlier that there was a desire to, if I'm able to find this out, you know, what are the consequences of not following the state mandate, if you want to use that word? I think I heard that question earlier. I do need to say that I feel enriched by this evening's conversation, by the comments that have been made in public comment, the questions that have been brought up. There certainly have been ideas. I need to say, though, that, you know, tomorrow our committee gets back together. This is a committee that I'm trying to honor, that is representing the stakeholders of all of our different groups. They're going to want to start moving ahead and actioning on some of the things, or not some of the things that they've heard tonight, or to try to help be a sounding board to that. That group needs to continue that, and then there'll be spinoffs from that in terms of how we're going to work now to what's our next steps with the robust distance learning plan. How do we make the hybrid work better? What are we doing to make quality for not just the in-person learning plan, but also the component of the parallel track for people who stay home? So all I'm saying is that work's going to keep going on. We'll be listening closely on Monday as well, but we have so many weeks. We only have, you know, we already have a main frame of our direction. There are some now. The question is, how do we play within the nuances out of each of those different plans and those different models? So I just don't want things to run counter to each other when we have some work restarting tomorrow, and what we're going to be doing in terms of what the takeaways are on Monday night, if that's possible.
So it seems like the word hybrid is used differently by different people. So there is the hybrid model where what the state means is that there's a rotation, right? So for example, some kids go on Monday, Wednesday, other kids go Tuesday, Thursday, something like that, right? So
They have a mixture. They
I
have
think-
some, yes, some on site and some at home.
Oh, okay. So the hybrid model that I think many people might be interested in exploring would be one where uh, you have in-person teaching to the extent that we have teachers that are willing to teach, right? And then you have distant learning. And so, you know, a kid that might be in person might get sick, to Megan's point, and might need to go to distant learning for a week or two or what have you. So there might be in and out, but basically, that's a hybrid model that I think lots of people are interested in.
I'd like to make an explicit suggestion about this. The words we use are really important for communicating clearly to people what is going on. And I think that that term hybrid is extremely confusing. So I know that the Connecticut state has used it to describe this middle model of the three that we are supposed to transmit among when the risk changes in terms of community transmission. But I think for the purposes of this report and for the purposes of the discussion here, it may be far better if we talk about it as a rotation model instead of a hybrid model. That is much clearer about what is the content of that model compared to this term hybrid. So if we eliminate the term hybrid from our discussion and talk about a rotation model and the parallel track model, for instance, I think everyone can understand those two terms. And I'd ask that maybe we try to adopt those terms in this conversation and as much as possible within the report that is going on to the state. I know the state has called it a hybrid model. We can just talk about the hybrid model dictated by the state or this rotation model and then continue that way. And that way, the terminology that we're using in discussions and in report writing can match what we're using in these conversations.
Thanks, Jeff. Mike Strambler, did you have anything additional that you wanted to add in?
Yeah, just a couple of brief things. So one is I'm also just to reiterate an earlier point I made, I'm very interested in understanding, trying to get a handle on which teachers, how many teachers would actually be willing to return to school. I think that that's a really important number for us to get, and I appreciate that WEA is willing to share that data. Something else that I heard from that survey, the report we got back from the survey is that some teachers have, well, actually, the majority of teachers have concerns about synchronous learning. And I would like to us to find ways of addressing those concerns. If I understood that correctly, one of those concerns was that it had to do with confidentiality. And that seems to be one that is easy to address. I mean, if we can do telehealth, we should be able to address confidentiality concerns in schools as well, and with distance learning. But I think that requires a conversation. I think that requires some investigation into the best ways of addressing those concerns that teachers have raised. And I don't know if there are more concerns beyond that confidentiality one, but it seems to me if we're going to be doing some distance learning, that synchronous learning will need to be an important piece to that component of distance learning. So I'm very interested in finding a way around some of those concerns that teachers have raised.
Would it be worthwhile having a live conversation around that? Because I'm afraid that if we just see comments, we won't really be able to understand the context and get at what really are the concerns. Could we? Is that a possibility?
You mean what? with the
What does that look
teachers.
like?
Yeah, to really have a conversation around this, because I think in order to improve our distance learning, that is a big part of probably, distance learning too, right? 2.0.
So we have a mode for that, right, in the contract that allows us to meet with the teachers and have a one-on-one. Maybe you could do it via the web conference, and it's not a fully public meeting. The Board of Ed gets the link, the WEA gets the link, the administration gets the link, and it's a closed, that's a question for Floyd to see if that could even work, right? But that does address what Joyce is trying to get at. And it's not a fully, because that meet and greet meeting is not a fully public meeting anyways, right, Bob?
It's meet and discuss as part of the contract.
Yeah.
The board can initiate it, or the union can initiate it.
All right, so from what I hear Joyce say, I'll clarify for her to Lynn. Lynn, as the board chair, can you do a vote right now to see if we can do a meet and discuss via web, and if the WEA would accept some model of that? And you could do that, not tonight, but we initiate it and see what they say.
Certainly. Is that the board's request?
Thanks for translating.
David Ross is yes. Megan?
You have a majority.
Yes,
Yep.
please.
Okay, so I'll reach out to WEA and ask to, we did have a meet and discuss meeting scheduled with the WEA as COVID came on us. And I believe there's been some requests to reschedule that, but it's been a difficult time for all of us. So I'll reach out again. Thanks for that. Megan, do you have any other comments or questions?
You skipped me. I was before Megan.
Dan, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
All right.
Dan, we don't want you to get upset.
All right. I'd cry over here, All right. So, Bob, just on Monday, I'm going to ask you where we find those objective standards. So I hope Monday you may have an answer. I want you to be prepared. So
Okay.
I don't want to sideswipe you.
Okay.
And one thing I took out of a conversation is that MAG is a kind of a great example of cohorting, possibly. If you have people that are going to come, let's say we have a 10% population that wants to come back, it's probably going to be the same families, right? If I had 10 kids, I'd send all 10 back, So maybe the MAG model of cohorting, where you have multiple ages in one classroom, and you have 2-3 families per class, then you've really kind of condensed the risk down to smaller groups. So that could be a model of cohorting that we already know how it works. It's not something I would have opted into originally, but if that's the way to get her back, I'll do it. The other thing too is I think we need to really be flexible in the way we think about things. So we've identified that kindergarten 1-2 is much more difficult to distance learn than 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So maybe the staffing needs to be shifted around so that we can have smaller K classes, even smaller than we have now, maybe 6-person kindergarten classes or something like that. And maybe we have larger 5, 6, 5th and 6th classes, because they're going to be predominantly remote, So being flexible in the way we look at classroom sizes and the way we deploy our staff is something that I think we should think about as well. Just wanted to plant that seed. And to comment on what Joyce said, I don't think we need to think if we can push the limit on it. The governor gave us the carve out. It's there. We just have to use it. Any parent can opt out for any reason. That's what was said. So we don't need to go ask permission for something that was already given permission for. It's done. It's there. So we just got to find out how many parents want to use it. That's what we need to quantify. So I say, even before you even ask the teachers, you may want to consider formally asking the parents. get that number and then go to the teachers and say, we only need 10%. Can you guys give us 10% to meet this? And everything goes away. You might have it, the numbers might match. You don't know until you ask your parents. It might be 3 families that say they want to come back. Well, then you have a pretty much distance learning model and everybody's happy, right? So it sucks to open an entire building, but maybe you just open up a wing. You know, I don't know what the solution, but without the number, you can't make any decision. That's it.
Hi,
Understand? Megan? Megan, did I lose you? Do
No,
you have anything
sorry.
else?
It's my
Nothing?
button.
Okay.
Well, one thing is, I think we did ask the parents that, we asked them if they plan on sending their children back, and 60% said yes. Now, another thing to remind ourselves is this is fluid, right? And things could change next week, weeks from now, and it would be totally different. And I think as a parent, it's hard to say for sure what I would do today in a month from now, or more than a month from now. So being flexible and realizing that it's a fluid situation is important. I think if we survey again, we're going to have to survey again, and maybe again. I don't know, or at least make sure if we survey now again, like right before school. And I guess perhaps part of that is making sure that we're under the assumption that when people are responding to where it is right now, that we're doing pretty okay with infections right now in Connecticut. Connecticut's doing great compared to a lot of our country, and that could change at any moment. So I think that's something to just keep in mind. One other thing about synchronous learning, just to say out loud again, was that I believe that was something I know that a lot of people are having anxiety about that and concerns about it, understandably. But I do believe that was something that MAG as well was able to get a bit of a grip around. So another thing to connect with them about, perhaps. So. And I don't know, there's so many layers to this whole thing, and this document was huge, and I have little comments here and there, but I think we can, I think that's good for tonight.
Okay, thank you, Megan.
Lynn, can I provide some information for just a moment? Just
Yes.
because I think Stacy Katz, our nurse supervisor, is in the audience. I think she can provide that information for Dan at this time. So it may be pretty quick information. Stacy, are you able to unmute and just share a little bit?
Great. Thanks, Bob.
Oh, Stacy, we can't hear you if you're talking.
Stacy, can you unmute?
Did that unmute?
There you go. I
Hi.
hear you now.
Okay,
Hi,
good.
Stacy.
Hi, everybody. Dan, that information you're looking for is when we would move through those models, like when we would get from the in-person learning to the rotation model and then to distance learning. You want those metrics. So those metrics would be actually given to us through the State of Connecticut Department of Health. And it would actually probably be told to us by the governor. So whether they would be, it would be from infection rate. And like right now we're below 1%, and they're gonna make a model, and they haven't come out with that yet, whether they're gonna say at 3 or 5%, they may move us to the, what we're gonna maybe call the rotation model. And then at 9%, they may say we need to go to distance learning. But at a state level, they're gonna come up with those metrics. So they every day they're coming out with what the infection rate is in the state of Connecticut, and you can follow those numbers.
No, and I understand that. So are you saying the numbers are 1 and 9?
No,
And
I don't know.
is-
They're going to come out with that number. I'm just saying they will use a number, and it will be low, and they're going to let us know that. They have not come out with those numbers yet, but they're watching it every single day, and they're going to come out with a number to let us know. But they're talking about it, and they have not come out with it yet.
So I would just say then we're
Jeff, and
With
Jeff, you
bated
want to say
breath,
something
waiting
about
for-
that?
Yeah, I just want to say those numbers are very hard to come up with. So I have, complete I have knowledge of how hard those are to come with and complete sympathy for those that are setting them. But I also just want to mention that those numbers are actually critically important for the decision making that parents and teachers have to do about whether they're going to go into school or not. So along with any sentiments that are expressed toward the state about other things, it would be extremely helpful to express the sentiment that those numbers, those decisions about what the transitions between things that are going to be coming down from the state are really, really important for all of the planning that is going on here. Because until we know what risk level the state is saying we have to be tolerant of, it's very, very difficult for anyone to make an informed decision about what risk they're willing to undertake.
And I think that needs to be like one thing I'm going to send to my senator tonight is that number, that scale needs to be published on a web somewhere where I can go every day and check it and see if I'm green and see if I'm 30% away from yellow, if I'm in the yellow deeper, and I should be, as a parent, like Jeff said, should be completely transparent. So when you
You can
speak
follow
to
every day what the infection rate is, how much.
I can follow the infection rate. I hear you, but I don't know what the state's number is. So that's the point. The state's number needs to be published visibly. So we're not asking you guys what it is. We as parents need to know what it is. And they need to be transparent with it. So it's objective, not subject. So they can't be changing it all the time.
Okay.
Stacy, thank you for jumping in and trying to help us understand. Appreciate your time.
Sorry, and I know I speak roughly, so I apologize.
We love you anyway, Dan. Jeff Hughes, do you have any further comments or questions?
Yeah, just to add to the conversation, I want to reiterate what Dan said. It's basically unheard of in an aging building to have the HVA system that we have in place. So that's no concern of mine being chairman of the facilities committee. I have no concerns with our HVAC system there. I also like to add to the conversation, our focus and priority is, the safety and education of our children, which absolutely should be. But we also can't lose sight of us as parents and the family unit at home. This pandemic caused an earthquake to the economy. So people who might not have had to work are now working. People who relied on one incomes now need two. So I think the home life has to come into this equation, especially those for the reopening committee and those who are making decisions. Our children are getting the best education during the day, but they come home to a stressful environment due to the way materials being presented or a rotating schedule. I think that has to come into really big consideration is the family life and us as parents. I just don't want to lose sight of that.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate those comments. Jeff Townsend, I'm looking at my list and I don't have a second check mark next to your name. So I don't know if I missed you. Another comment to make.
Yeah, I think I've taken the opportunity to chime in at various times when I wanted to, and can just let us move on with the rest of the discussion. And thank you for remembering that I hadn't had a chance yet to speak up in terms of follow-up.
Thanks, Jeff. I think we've had a fairly rich conversation tonight. I think, Bob, you have some marching orders as well as I have some things that I need to take care of tomorrow. I think that those people who are on the reopening committee have gotten a lot of information from this particular board meeting, special board meeting tonight. So I just want to check in with you, Bob, that you are set on what you need for Monday night. And I've already made a request of WEA to share the survey with both me and the administrative assistant for Monday's meeting so that it can be shared.
Can we just talk about that out loud for a moment? So I know you're going to approach WEA, Lynn, regarding the survey and see where that's at in terms of providing that.
Yep.
That's number one. We want to invite, is it 2 or 3 of those medical experts? Did we say?
I believe we're inviting clinical experts and Dan was
HVAC. fan zone.
HVAC.
Mhm. We also wanted to see if we found that, if there was information from the state on consequences.
Actually,
That's correct. Could you just hang on a second, Joyce? Go ahead, Bob. Keep going through your list and then we'll get to you, Joyce.
I think those are the main things I have here. I've got lots of little pieces of paper here, so I'm trying to make sure. There anything I'm missing there? I think you're what else?
That was what I had for Monday night on my list, and I also had to reach out to WEA about meet and discuss on my list. Joyce, go ahead.
yeah, upon reflection, I'm not sure it would be prudent to actually ask what the consequences are as I'm thinking about it, because what we're really exploring very seriously is for people to exercise the carve out should they feel uncomfortable coming to school, right? That I think we're kind of encouraging people to look at it that way. And so given that that's where we're going, I wouldn't want to put up red flags for the state, but what do other people think? Okay.
Ask forgiveness,
I
nothing.
think that's right. I think it's up to us to make that carve out a strong one, a robust one.
Yeah, and I
Exactly.
think that maybe when we do another survey, we are very clear about the carve out, how it works, explain what the plan is, help people understand how distance learning is going to be different than what we saw in the spring so that they can make a more informed decision. And then that way we can plan like how many families are going to opt in or out.
Okay,
One thing I wanted to circle back to,
go ahead, Megan.
Lynn, was just to mention, I don't know if there's any reason WA may not want to post the results publicly. If they choose to, that's fine. They can send it to Marcia. But if they choose that they don't want it public, they can send it to you or I or the board, and we wouldn't publicly post it. We would just review it. So that's just to put that out there. I don't know if there's any reason they might not want to publicize that. Just to make sure we can see them, before next meeting. Would be great.
I'll clarify that with WEA.
It may not be an issue, but just wanted to say it out loud in case that is a concern.
Okay, I got that on my list. Anything else? Okay, wonderful. I thank you all for putting in this time this evening and for your work on the Board of Education. It's not an easy job right now. I'm going to just, before we adjourn, remind board members that following this meeting, there will be a non-meeting for the discussion of contract negotiations with the WASA group, and we'll be using David Ross's Zoom link for that meeting. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I move that we adjourn.
Second. Megan seconded. Marcia, in case you didn't see that. David Ross made the motion. Megan seconded. Are there any in opposition, which would be so much easier than calling all your names? Please speak up. Thanks, everyone.